"You must be with the catering staff." The words landed soft as silk, sharp as glass. I looked up from straightening my pale blue dress, the most expensive thing I'd ever owned, bought by my son Jordan 3 weeks ago, into the cool, appraising eyes of Patricia Whitmore. She stood there in champagne chiffon diamonds, catching the museum's recessed lighting, looking at me the way you'd look at a stain on an otherwise perfect tablecloth. "No, ma'am," I said quietly, my West Virginia accent suddenly feeling thicker than usual. "I'm a guest." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows lifted just a fraction. "I see. Well, seating is assigned. You'll want to check with the coordinator." She gestured vaguely toward a harried-looking young woman with a clipboard, then turned away, her perfume trailing behind her like a dismissal. I stood there in the soaring marble hall of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, surrounded by strangers in glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos, and felt myself shrinking. This wasn't new. I'd been shrinking for months now, ever since my son brought Angela home. But standing here watching Patricia Whitmore, Angela's mother, walk away without asking my name, without curiosity, without even basic courtesy, I felt something crack inside my chest. Because she should have known who I was. She should have known that the woman in the modest blue dress was Brenda Lawrence, that I was the mother of the groom, that I had raised the man her daughter was about to marry. But she didn't know, and that wasn't an accident. 3 months ago, Jordan had called me at the small apartment I'd finally allowed him to rent for me in Brooklyn. His voice had that careful tone he used when he was about to ask me something he knew I wouldn't like. "Mom, Angela and I need to talk to you about the wedding." I'd been folding laundry, still couldn't break the habit, even though Jordan had hired someone to do that now. "What about it, sweetheart?" "It's going to be big. Like really big. Over 300 people. Business Associates Society Connections Press." He paused. "Angela's concerned about privacy." Privacy. I set down the towel I was folding. Through the phone I could hear the hum of his office, the muffled sounds of Manhattan 30 floors below. "She thinks we think it might be better if we kept family matters quiet at the event. You know how the media is. They'd turn your story into, I don't know, some kind of circus. Billionaire's mother was a cleaning lady or whatever." My hand stilled on the towel. "I was a waitress too, and worked nights at the packaging plant." "I know, Mom. I know." His voice softened. "That's not what I meant. Angela thinks people might sensationalize it. Make it about rags to riches instead of about our marriage. She wants to protect you from that attention." I should have heard it then. The careful way he said Angela thinks instead of we think. The way protect you sounded more like protect herself. But I was his mother, and I'd spent 40 years reading between his silences, and what I heard was my son asking me for something important. "So what are you suggesting?" I asked. "Just keep a low profile at the wedding. We won't make formal introductions. Afterwards, when things settle down, we'll do a proper family gathering. I promise." I looked around my small apartment, the one bedroom in Brooklyn that Jordan insisted on paying for the furniture he'd bought the kitchen. I'd finally stopped feeling guilty about not cleaning myself. Everything I had now came from my son's success. The least I could do was give him this. "All right, Jordan, if that's what you and Angela want." "Thank you, Mom. You're the best. I love you." "I love you too, baby." I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. Through the window I could hear the sounds of Brooklyn car horns, distant music, someone's television bleeding through thin walls. I thought about Angela, the beautiful dark-haired woman with her perfect smile and cold eyes. I thought about the way she'd look at my hands, sometimes the ones still rough and cracked, despite months of not scrubbing floors. The way she'd correct my pronunciation of certain words, always with a sweet smile, always in front of other people. But Jordan loved her. And Jordan was happy. And wasn't that what I'd worked 3 jobs for? Wasn't that what I'd sold Robert's wedding ring for, the last thing I had of my dead husband, so Jordan could have seed money for his second startup? I'd made it possible for him to marry a woman like Angela Whitmore. A woman from old money, from society, from a world where people went to museums for weddings instead of churches. I just hadn't realized that making it possible for him to enter that world might mean I couldn't follow. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time when I was the most important person in someone's world. Robert Lawrence met me at a church picnic in 1982. I was 19, wearing a yellow sundress my mama had made, and he was 21 with coal dust still under his fingernails from the morning shift. He had hands like warm stones and a laugh that could shake leaves from trees. When he smiled at me over potato salad and sweet tea, I felt seen in a way I'd never felt before. We were married 6 months later in that same church. I wore Mama's wedding dress, altered to fit my smaller frame. Robert wore his daddy's suit. We didn't have money for a honeymoon, so we spent our wedding night in the tiny house Robert had rented, 2 rooms and a kitchen so small you could touch both walls while standing in the middle. "It's not much," he said, looking embarrassed as he carried me over the threshold. I kissed him. "It's ours. That makes it everything." Jordan came 2 years later in the middle of a thunderstorm so fierce the power went out at the hospital. The nurses brought candles, and my son entered the world by flickering light, screaming his lungs out like he was angry at the darkness. Robert held him with those calloused hands, gentle as if Jordan were made of spider silk, and cried, "Look at him, Brenda. Look at what we made." I looked. I saw Robert's determined chin, my daddy's nose and eyes that were already too clever for a newborn. I saw possibility. I saw a future different from the one stretching behind us, the coal mines that had claimed Robert's father and grandfather, the hard lives of Appalachian women who aged too fast and died too young. "He's going to get out of here," I whispered. "He's going to be something we can't even imagine." Robert kissed my forehead. "Then we better get to work, Mama." We didn't know how little time we'd have. Jordan was 12 when Robert died, not from black lung like I'd feared, but from something quicker and crueler. A support beam failed in the mine. There was a sound like the world cracking open, and then darkness, and then nothing. They called me at the diner where I'd started working part-time to save for Jordan's school supplies. Ruby's Diner with its cracked red vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like rust. I was carrying a tray of burgers to table 6 when the mine foreman came in, hat in his hands, face gray as ash. I knew before he said a word. The tray slipped. I didn't hear it hit the floor. I didn't hear anything except a high ringing in my ears like the aftermath of an explosion. Ruby caught me before I fell, her strong, dark hands gripping my arms, and I thought nonsensically, desperately, that if I didn't move, if I didn't go to the mine, then it wouldn't be real. But it was real. The mine had already taken Robert's last breath, and his last thought, I learned later, had been of us. They found his wallet in his pocket, waterproof bag and all. Inside was a photo, me, Jordan, and Robert at Jordan's last birthday party, all of us grinning at the camera. Jordan's teacher had taken it. On the back, in Robert's careful handwriting, my reasons for everything. I held that photo at his funeral. Held it during the visitation when half the town came through to shake my hand and tell me Robert was a good man, as if I didn't know that, as if knowing that made any difference. Held it while they lowered his casket into ground that was just as hard and unforgiving as the mine that killed him. Jordan didn't cry. Not at the funeral, not during the visitation, not even when we came home to our empty house and I finally broke down in the kitchen. He just stood there, 12 years old, in his too small suit from the church donation bin, looking at me with eyes that suddenly seemed ancient. "I'll take care of you, Mom," he said. "I promise." "Baby, that's not your job. Dad's not here, so it's my job now." He said it simply factually, the way you'd state that water is wet or the sky is blue. Then he went to his room, closed the door, and I heard nothing else. I didn't know until years later that he'd gone to his window and looked out at the mountains that had taken his father, at the poverty that was our inheritance, at the life that stretched ahead of us like a prison sentence, and made himself a promise. "I'm going to build you a castle, Mom. I'm going to get us out." The bills started arriving 2 weeks after the funeral. Medical bills from Robert's last hospital stay. They'd tried to save him, run test after test, all of it adding up to numbers that made my vision blur. Funeral costs, the mortgage on our tiny house, electric, water, food. The mine's compensation was laughable, barely enough to cover a month of expenses. The company lawyer, a man in a suit too nice for our town, explained with practiced sympathy that Robert had signed certain waivers, that accidents were part of the job, that we should be grateful for what we got. I looked at that lawyer across his clean desk in his air-conditioned office and felt something harden in my chest. He thought I would just accept it. Thought I'd be grateful for crumbs. "Thank you for your time," I said, standing. My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't give him that. I walked out and went straight to Ruby's Diner. Ruby took one look at my face and poured coffee without asking. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough that I need more hours. Any hours you got." Ruby was 63, a black woman who'd run that diner for 30 years after her own husband died young. She'd seen women like me before, women with dead husbands and desperate eyes and children to feed. "I can give you 5 to 2, she said. 6 days a week. It ain't much. I'll take it. Brenda, she put her rough hand over mine. What else you planning? Whatever it takes, Ruby. Whatever it takes. By the end of the month, I had 3 jobs. 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Ruby's Diner. 8 hours of standing, smiling, pouring coffee that tasted like pennies for men who reminded me too much of Robert. Men with coal dust in the lines of their faces and exhaustion in their eyes. They left quarters for tips, sometimes $1 if they'd had a good week. I collected every coin like treasure. 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., I cleaned houses in the next town over the one where people had money from professions that didn't kill them. Doctors, lawyers, the principal of Jordan's school. I scrubbed their toilets, mopped their floors, washed windows until I could see my own ghost reflected back at me. My hands, which had once been soft enough to make Robert sigh when I touched his face, became raw and cracked. The smell of bleach soaked into my skin so deep I could taste it. And 3 nights a week from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., worked the packaging line at the manufacturing plant on Route 7, standing at a conveyor belt, putting products in boxes on pallets, my back screaming, my feet swollen, my hands moving on autopilot while my mind drifted to Jordan, sleeping in his bed to the homework I'd help him with after my shift to the future. I was buying him 1 painful hour at a time. I slept maybe 4 hours a night, survived on coffee so strong it was basically diesel fuel, and the kind of determination that comes from having no other choice. Jordan never complained. Not once. He'd come home from school to an empty house, do his homework at Ruby's Diner while I worked, walk himself home, put himself to bed. On Saturdays, he'd sit in the corner of whatever house I was cleaning doing advanced math problems while I vacuumed around him. The families I cleaned for would sometimes comment on him. What a well-behaved boy. So quiet. Does he always study like that? Yes, I wanted to say. Because he knows this is temporary. Because he knows he's getting out. Because his father died in the dark, and he's going to live in the light if it kills me. But I just smiled and said, he's a good student. Howard Brennan was the principal of Jordan's high school, a man with thinning hair and the kind of face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. I knew him in 2 ways, as the man who sometimes called to tell me Jordan had won another academic award, and as the man whose house I cleaned every Thursday afternoon. He never acknowledged me when I cleaned his house. Would walk past me in the hallway like I was furniture. His wife was the same, leaving lists of tasks, never a greeting payment left on the kitchen counter like I was something shameful that couldn't be acknowledged directly. But I needed that job. It paid better than most. So I swallowed my pride and scrubbed their toilets and told myself it was worth it. Jordan was 16 when I got the call about the advanced placement courses. They cost extra fees for the exams, fees for the materials, fees for everything. $200 per course. Jordan wanted to take 5. $1,000. It might as well have been $1 million. I made an appointment to see Principal Brennan at the school. Wore my best dress, the navy blue one I'd worn to Robert's funeral. Brushed my hair, tried to hide my cracked hands in my pockets. Walked into his office like I was walking to my execution. Mrs. Lawrence? He didn't stand. I assume this is about Jordan's course fees. Yes, sir. I was hoping... My voice caught. I hated that it caught. I was hoping I could pay in installments. $20 a week. I'll sign whatever you need. He sighed like I was an inconvenience. Pulled out a form. Sign here. Payment is due every Friday. If you miss more than 2 payments, Jordan will be removed from the courses. I won't miss any. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes, pity mixed with disdain. Mrs. Lawrence, perhaps it would be better if Jordan focused on more practical pursuits. Not every child is meant for university. My hands clenched in my pockets. My son is brilliant. I'm sure he is. But university is expensive. Beyond these course fees, there's tuition, room, and board. I'm aware, Mr. Brennan, and I'll handle it. By cleaning houses. He didn't say it meanly, almost kindly, which was worse. I'm just trying to be realistic. I signed the form. My signature, once elegant, now shook slightly from exhaustion, but it was firm enough to make an impression. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Brennan. Jordan will take the courses. I walked out with my head high, shoulders straight. Made it all the way to my car before I let my hands shake. Before I let myself cry. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for years, was that Jordan had come to the school that day to bring me my coat. I'd forgotten it that morning in my rush to get to the diner on time. He'd walked into the building, heard voices from Brennan's office, recognized mine. He stood in that hallway outside the principal's door and heard every word. Heard Brennan's condescension. Heard the crack in my voice when I said I'll handle it. Heard me beg for the chance to pay in installments so he could take classes he deserved. Jordan told me years later, after he'd sold his first company, that he stood in that hallway with his hands clenched into fists and tears running down his face and made a vow, "I'm going to be so successful that people like Brennan have to smile when they see me coming. I'm going to make you proud, Mom. I'm going to make it so you never have to beg again." But in that moment, I didn't know any of that. I just drove to my next job, wiped my tears, and kept going. The scholarship letter from MIT came on a Tuesday in March. Jordan ran all the way to Ruby's diner, bursting through the door with the envelope, his face blazing with joy. Mom, I got in full ride," Ruby whooped. The regulars applauded. I dropped the coffee pot I was holding. It shattered on the tile floor, brown liquid spreading like spilled dreams, and I didn't care. I ran to my son and held him while he shook with excitement and relief and pure unbridled hope. "Full ride," I whispered. "You're sure? Full tuition, Mom, room and board, everything. I just need money for books and supplies and—" He pulled back, suddenly worried. "We can manage that, right? I would have sold my kidney if I had to." "We'll manage it, baby. We'll manage it." He left for Boston in August. I drove him to the airport in my rattling Ford, both of us crying, both of us pretending we weren't. At the gate, he held me tight. "Mom, I'm going to make this worth it. Everything you did. I promise. Just be happy, Jordan. That's all I need." He was happy, and brilliant, and driven with the kind of focus that comes from watching your mother work herself into dust. He called me every Sunday, no matter what. Told me about his classes, his professors, his friends from worlds so different from ours I could barely imagine them. And he worked 2 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load. Summers doing internships that barely paid. Studying until 3 a.m. because he couldn't afford to be anything less than perfect. His first startup launched the summer after graduation. A software platform for small businesses, something he'd built in his dorm room with a classmate. They called it ClearPath Solutions. It failed within 8 months. Jordan called me the night they shut it down. I was in bed after a double shift the diner and cleaning houses, every muscle in my body screaming. His voice was hollow. "Mom, it's over. We're out of money. I don't know what to do." "Come home," I said. "Rest. Regroup." "I can't come home. I can't give up. I need capital to try again. But I've got nothing. No investor wants to touch me now. I'm a failure." "You are not a failure, Jordan Lawrence. You hear me? You are 22 years old and you're trying. Your daddy would be so proud." "What good is pride if I can't pay my rent?" I looked at my hand in the dim light from the street lamp outside. On my finger, the only jewelry I still owned, Robert's wedding ring. The simple gold band he'd saved 3 months of coal mining wages to buy. The ring I'd worn for 14 years of marriage and 12 years of widowhood. "How much do you need?" I asked. "Mom, no, I can't, Mom. How much, Jordan?" 15,000 would let me try again. Build the next version. "But Mom, I can't take." "You're not taking, I'm giving. Let me call you back." I hung up before he could argue. Got dressed, drove to the pawn shop on the edge of town, the one that was open late for desperate people. Walked in with my shoulders straight and my ring in my palm. "How much for this?" The man behind the counter, tattooed, bored, barely glanced at it. "Gold's gold. I can give you $1,200. It had cost Robert $3,000 in $1982. "It's worth more than that." "Not to me, it ain't." I looked at that ring. Remembered Robert's hands trembling as he slid it on my finger. Remembered every time I'd twisted it while worried, every time I'd felt its weight and been comforted. "I need 15,000. What else can I give you?" I sold the ring, sold my mama's china, sold the one nice watch Robert's parents had given us as a wedding gift, pulled what little savings I had, borrowed some from Ruby, who didn't ask questions, just handed me cash and hugged me tight. I got Jordan his $15,000. 6 months later, his second startup got acquired by Google for $800 million. Jordan called me at 4 a.m, sobbing so hard he couldn't speak. When he finally got words out, they were, Mom, we made it. We finally made it." I sat on the edge of my bed in my tiny house in West Virginia, surrounded by the life I'd lived for 40 years, and let myself cry too. Jordan bought me the apartment in Brooklyn before I'd even agreed to move. Just called me one day and said, "Mom, I'm coming to get you. You're done working. You're done struggling. It's my turn now." Jordan, I can't just leave. Yes, you can. Ruby's retiring. The diner's closing. The manufacturing plant laid you off last month. There's nothing keeping you there except ghosts and Mom. His voice broke. I need you here. I need to see you. I need to take care of you the way you took care of me. So I left West Virginia. Left the house where I'd raised my son and buried my husband. Left Ruby, who cried and told me to go be happy. Left the mountains that had been my prison and my home. I arrived in New York on a Tuesday in October. Jordan met me at the airport with a car service, an actual car service with a driver in a suit. I stood there with my single suitcase, everything I owned in the world, and felt like an alien who'd landed on the wrong planet. The apartment was in Brooklyn in a building with a doorman who called me ma'am and held doors. It had a bedroom, a living room, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know how to use, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, furniture so pristine I was afraid to sit on it. It's too much, I whispered. Jordan took my hands. Mom, it's not enough. It'll never be enough for what you gave me. But he didn't understand. He couldn't understand. For 40 years, my identity had been built on work, on providing, on staying busy. Now suddenly I had nothing to do. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. because my body still remembered the diner shift. I'd wander the empty apartment, my hands restless, my mind spinning. Jordan had hired a cleaning service, a cook who came 3 times a week, even a woman who did laundry. I had no purpose. One morning, Jordan found me on my knees in the guest bathroom, scrubbing the grout with a toothbrush. Mom, what are you doing? I looked up, embarrassed. It was dirty. That's what I pay Maria for. I know, but I stopped. How could I explain I just need my hands to be busy, sweetheart? He knelt beside me, took the toothbrush gently from my hand. I'm hiring you a therapist. I don't need, please, for me. The therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen Lu Yi, Tren Ho Chen Yu Yu Ko. Suang was a kind woman with intelligent eyes who listened to me talk about feeling useless, about survivor's guilt, about not knowing who I was if I wasn't working. You're experiencing a loss of identity, she said. For decades, your value was tied to what you could do for others. Now you need to learn your value as a person, not a provider. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Harder than 3 jobs. Harder than watching Robert's casket lowered into the ground. Learning to just be. Jordan brought Angela home on a Saturday in April. I'd been in New York for 6 months, was just starting to feel like maybe I could breathe in this new life. Mom, I want you to meet someone. She was beautiful. Objectively, undeniably beautiful in the way that magazine covers are beautiful, perfect, and untouchable. Dark hair that fell in wave skin like porcelain, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car. Mrs. Lawrence? She extended a hand perfectly manicured. I've heard so much about you. Jordan talks about you constantly. I took her hand, conscious of my own rough palms against her smooth skin. Please call me Brenda. It's wonderful to meet you. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. We had dinner takeout that Jordan ordered spread across my small dining table. Angela asked polite questions about West Virginia, about my life, about how I was adjusting to New York. Her voice was warm, interested, perfectly modulated. But I watched her eyes, watched them flick to my hands when I used my fork wrong, watched them assess my apartment, my clothes, me, watched her calculate and categorize and file me away under obstacle. After they left, I stood at my window and looked out at Brooklyn spreading beneath me, and I thought, she's going to take him somewhere I can't follow. I told myself I was being paranoid, told myself I was being unfair. Jordan loved her, and Jordan deserved happiness, even if that happiness didn't have room for me. Jordan proposed to Angela on New Year's Eve at the stroke of midnight on the rooftop of his penthouse overlooking Times Square. He told me about it the next morning, his voice bright with joy and champagne. She said, "Yes, Mom, we're getting married." I was sitting in my apartment watching the remnants of confetti blow through Brooklyn streets, feeling the weight of another year settling on my shoulders. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you. I want you to be part of the planning. Angela's mother is taking charge of most of it, but I want you involved. Of course, whatever you need. But the invitation to be involved never quite materialized. Over the following months, I'd hear about decisions already made, the venue, the Metropolitan Museum, the date June 15th, the guest list 347 people. Angela's mother, Patricia, had connections with every society event planner in Manhattan. They moved in a world of calligraphy and champagne tastings and seating charts that read like a who's who of New York's elite. I got updates and phone calls from Jordan, always slightly apologetic. They're thinking orchids. The color scheme is ivory and gold. Angela's mother knows this amazing photographer. Never, what do you think, Mom? Never, we'd love your input. I told myself it was fine. I had no experience with society weddings. I'd gotten married in a church basement with folding chairs and a cake from the grocery store. What could I possibly contribute to a Metropolitan Museum affair? But there were smaller slights. Harder to name, impossible to complain about without sounding petty. Like the dress shopping trip I wasn't invited to. Jordan mentioned it casually over dinner one night, just the two of us at a quiet Italian place in his neighborhood. Angela found her dress today. Mom, you should see it. It's incredible. Vera Wang custom made. She cried when she put it on. I set down my fork carefully. That's lovely, sweetheart. Her mom and her bridesmaids were there. They made a whole day of it. Champagne lunch at Per Se, the works. I nodded, smiling while something twisted in my chest. I was the groom's mother. In the world I came from, the groom's mother would be invited to help choose the dress. But in this world, Angela's world, I was apparently an afterthought. I'm sure she looked beautiful, I said. Jordan's eyes flickered with something, guilt maybe, or awareness. You know, if you want to go dress shopping for yourself, I can send you to the same boutique. Get you something really special. That would be nice. He pulled out his phone. I'll have my assistant set it up. Whatever you want, Mom. Price is no object. But he didn't offer to come with me. Didn't suggest we make it a day together, mother and son. Just have my assistant arrange it. Like I was another task on his list. I went alone to the boutique the following week. The saleswoman was polite but distant, showing me dresses in muted colors, beige, taupe, pale blue. Nothing too vibrant. Nothing that might draw attention. For the mother of the groom, we recommend something understated, she explained, holding up a champagne-colored dress that looked like it belonged in a retirement home brochure. You want to compliment, not compete. I bought the pale blue one. Knee-length, simple, expensive, in a quiet way. The kind of dress that said, I know my place. The microaggressions started so subtly, I almost didn't notice them. A word here, a suggestion there, all delivered with Angela's perfect smile and honey-sweet voice. We were having lunch at a cafe in Soho. Angela had invited me, said she wanted to get to know her future mother-in-law better. I'd been hopeful. Maybe I'd misjudged her. Brenda, I love your accent, she said, stirring her overpriced salad. It's so authentic, very Appalachian. Thank you. I wasn't sure it was a compliment. You know, if you ever wanted to work with a speech coach, I know someone wonderful. She helped my cousin lose her Boston accent completely. Very discreet. I set down my water glass. I'm not trying to lose my accent, Angela. Oh, of course not. I just meant, well, at the wedding there will be a lot of Jordan's business associates. First impressions matter in his world, you know. She reached across the table, patted my hand. I'm just trying to help you feel comfortable. But her eyes said something else. They said, you embarrass us. Another time we were at Jordan's penthouse for dinner. Angela was cooking, or rather supervising, while Jordan's chef prepared the meal. I'd offered to help, an old instinct, but Angela had waved me away. You're our guest, Brenda. Just relax. I sat at the counter feeling useless, watching Angela move through Jordan's kitchen like she owned it. She probably would soon enough. She was talking about the wedding registry, scrolling through options on her iPad. We're thinking Tiffany for the china, Christopher for the silverware. Oh, and Jordan, your mother should see these. She turned the iPad toward me. On the screen were forks. Just forks. But they looked like they cost more than my first month's rent in Brooklyn. These are gorgeous, aren't they? The Malmaison pattern. Very classic. I looked at the forks, ornate, heavy, completely impractical. They're lovely. Of course you probably used simpler things growing up. Nothing wrong with that. But this is the quality Jordan's used to now. She said it so sweetly, so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. Jordan, chopping vegetables at the counter, didn't seem to notice the barb. Or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. I watched him, my son, the boy I'd raised who'd eaten off mismatched plates from the thrift store, and been grateful, and wondered when he'd gotten used to Christopher silverware. Mom, you okay? He asked, looking up. Just tired, sweetheart. Angela smiled. Of course you are. At your age, late nights must be difficult. We should do these dinners earlier for you. I was 63, not ancient, but the way she said "at your age" made me feel like I should be in a nursing home. I learned about the prenuptial agreement by accident. I'd stopped by Jordan's office one afternoon. He'd asked me to meet him for lunch, said he had something to discuss. His assistant directed me to wait in his office while he finished a meeting. I sat in one of the leather chairs, looking around at the space that represented everything Jordan had built. Awards on the walls, photos from tech conferences, a framed Forbes cover with his face on it, 30 under 30 tech's brightest minds. On his desk, partially obscured by a laptop, was a document. I wouldn't have looked. I'd raised Jordan to respect privacy, but I saw my name. Brenda Lawrence in the middle of a paragraph of legal text. My hands shook as I pulled the document closer. It was the prenuptial agreement. Pages and pages of legal language I could barely understand, but certain phrases jumped out. Party A, Jordan Lawrence, agrees to maintain sole ownership of all assets acquired prior to marriage. Party B, Angela Whitmore, shall receive compensation in the amount of $50 million, $50 million in the event of marriage dissolution after 5 years. In the event of marriage dissolution within the first year due to fault of Party B, all financial agreements are void. There was more. Clauses about infidelity, about public image, about protecting Jordan's business interests. I understood maybe half of it. But what I did understand was this: Angela stood to gain $50 million if the marriage lasted 5 years. And she stood to lose everything if it ended in the first year because of something she did. Jordan walked in as I was reading his phone still pressed to his ear. He saw the document in my hands, saw my face, and quickly ended his call. "Mom, is this real?" I asked quietly. He closed the door, ran a hand through his hair. "It's standard. Everyone at my level does prenups. $50 million? She's giving up her career to marry me, to be part of my life. It's only fair she's compensated if things don't work out." He said it like he was explaining a business transaction, which I suppose he was. "And if it ends in the first year?" "Mom, it's not going to end. I love her." But he didn't answer my question. I looked at my son, this brilliant man I'd raised who could see through complex business problems in seconds, and wondered how he couldn't see what I saw. Angela wasn't just marrying him for love. She was marrying him for security, for status, for 50 million reasons. "Does she love you, Jordan?" "Of course she does. Mom, why are you—" He stopped, sat down across from me. "I know you and Angela haven't exactly clicked. I know she can be particular. But she makes me happy. Isn't that what you always wanted?" I wanted to tell him the truth. Wanted to say I wanted you happy with someone who sees you the way I do, who loves you for the boy who shared his library books, not the man with the Forbes cover. But looking at his face, so hopeful, so defensive, I knew he wouldn't hear it. "You're right," I said softly. "I want you happy." He relaxed. "Thank you. And Mom, about the wedding. Angela mentioned that you might be more comfortable keeping a low profile. With the press and everything, I think it's probably for the best." There it was, the real reason for this lunch. To tell me as gently as possible to make myself invisible at my own son's wedding. "I understand," I said, and I did. I understood that I was an embarrassment, a reminder of poverty and struggle in a world that valued wealth and ease. I understood that Angela had decided I didn't fit into the story she was telling about her life. And I understood that Jordan, whether he admitted it or not, agreed with her. I woke up at 5 a.m. on June 15th in a hotel room I'd had to book myself. Jordan had offered to pay, of course, had his assistant send me a list of suitable accommodations. But Angela's family had reserved an entire floor at the plaza for their relatives. There had been no room for me. Or rather, there had been room, just not the will to include me. I lay in the dark, listening to New York wake up outside my window, and thought about Robert. If he were alive, what would he think of all this? Would he be proud of Jordan's success? Or would he see what I saw, that somewhere along the way, our son had learned to be ashamed of where he came from? My phone buzzed, a text from Jordan. "Morning, Mom. Can't wait to see you today. Love you." Just words on a screen. Easy to send, harder to mean when you'd asked your mother to stay invisible at your wedding. I got dressed slowly, the pale blue dress. Simple jewelry, just the watch Jordan had given me for my birthday, the only expensive thing I owned that I'd actually chosen. I did my makeup the way the woman at the department store had shown me, though my hands shook and I had to redo my lipstick 3 times. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. This polished, quiet woman in her expensive dress and careful makeup. Where was Brenda from West Virginia? Where was the woman who'd worked 3 jobs and raised a brilliant son and survived everything life threw at her? She'd been erased slowly, carefully by 1,000 small cuts. And I'd let it happen. The museum was transformed. I'd been there once before when I first moved to New York. Jordan had taken me on a tour, eager to show me the culture his new city offered. I'd walked through galleries of priceless art, feeling completely out of place, my scuffed shoes squeaking on marble floors. Now those same floors were covered in ivory carpets. The great hall where Jordan and Angela would marry had been turned into something from a fairy tale, thousands of white orchids, crystal chandeliers, chairs covered in cream silk. A string quartet played Bach. Everywhere I looked, beautiful people in beautiful clothes greeted each other with air kisses and champagne. I stood near the entrance, clutching my small purse, and felt like I'd stumbled into the wrong event. "Excuse me, are you with the catering staff?" I turned. Patricia Whitmore stood there in champagne chiffon diamonds at her throat, looking at me with polite expectation. "No, ma'am. I'm a guest." Her eyes traveled over my dress, assessing dismissing. "I see. Seating is assigned. You'll want to check with Simone." She gestured vaguely toward a woman with a clipboard, then turned away before I could respond. She didn't ask my name, didn't ask my connection to the bride or groom, just saw a woman in a quiet dress and assumed I was service staff. I should have said something, should have introduced myself. I'm Brenda Lawrence Jordan's mother. But the words stuck in my throat, heavy as stones, because Patricia Whitmore should have known who I was. Jordan had been dating Angela for 18 months. They'd been engaged for 5, and Angela's mother didn't even recognize the groom's mother. That wasn't an oversight. That was intentional. I found Simone with her clipboard, gave my name, was directed to a seat in the 5th row. Not the front row where mothers typically sit. The 5th row where I'd be far enough back to be forgotten, but close enough to not cause questions. I sat down in my assigned seat, surrounded by strangers, and watched my son's wedding begin. Jordan looked so handsome standing at the altar in his tuxedo. Tall like his father, with Robert's strong jaw and determined eyes. For a moment, watching him wait for his bride, I forgot all the slights and hurts. This was my son, my baby, the boy I'd raised against impossible odds. And he was happy. Angela appeared at the top of the aisle, and even I had to admit she was breathtaking. The Vera Wang dress was perfect layers of ivory silk, a cathedral train, a veil that seemed to float around her like a cloud. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, smiling like a princess in a fairy tale. When she reached Jordan, I saw his face transform. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world, like she was everything. I wondered if she looked at him the same way, or if she saw dollar signs and social status and a ticket back into the world that had rejected her family. The ceremony was beautiful, traditional, the kind of wedding you see in magazines. They exchanged vows written by some fancy officiant, promised to love and honor, slipped platinum rings onto each other's fingers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Jordan kissed her, and everyone applauded. The string quartet swelled into something triumphant. And I sat in the 5th row, clapping along with everyone else, feeling like a spectator at someone else's life. The reception was in the museum's main hall, a cavernous space with ceilings so high they seemed to touch heaven. Round tables covered in ivory linen, each centerpiece a small fortune in orchids and roses. China so delicate it looked like it might shatter if you breathed on it. Crystal glasses that caught the light from chandeliers and threw rainbows across white tablecloths. I found my assigned seat at table 12. Not the family table, not even close. Table 12 was near the back, populated by what appeared to be distant cousins and +1s of +1s. People who smiled politely and asked how I knew the couple. "I'm Jordan's mother," I said to the woman on my left. Her eyes widened. "Oh, I didn't realize, Angela never mentioned—" She stopped, flustered. "How wonderful. You must be so proud." I am, but inside I was dying, because even these strangers were surprised to learn Jordan had a mother. Angela had erased me so completely that my existence was a shock. I watched the head table where Jordan and Angela sat with their wedding party. Patricia Whitmore was there holding court, laughing at something Angela's maid of honor said. Jordan's best man, a college friend I'd met once, raised his glass in a toast. No one looked my way. No one even knew I was there. The toasts began. The best man told stories about Jordan at MYT about all-nighters and coding marathons and the moment he'd met Angela at a tech conference. And I knew right away, he said, that she was way out of his league. But somehow this genius convinced her to take a chance on him. Everyone laughed. Jordan beamed. Angela blew him a kiss. The maid of honor told stories about Angela, her sorority days, her career in journalism, her impeccable taste. She's always known exactly what she wanted, the maid of honor said, and now she has it all. I wondered if it all included a mother-in-law she was ashamed of. Then Jordan stood to speak. The room fell quiet. He looked so happy, so full of love and hope and dreams of the future. I want to thank everyone for being here today, he began. This is the happiest day of my life. He talked about meeting Angela, about falling in love, about building a life together. He thanked Patricia and her father for welcoming him into their family. He thanked his best man and the groomsmen. He didn't mention me, not once. I sat at table 12, hands folded in my lap, and felt something crack inside my chest. This was my son, the boy I'd worked 3 jobs to raise, the boy I'd sold my wedding ring for, the boy who'd promised me a castle. And at his wedding I was nobody. I needed air, needed to breathe, needed to get away from the laughter and the champagne and the overwhelming evidence of my own erasure. I stood intending to slip out quietly, maybe find a balcony or a quiet corner to collect myself. But as I made my way through the tables, I saw him. A young server, he couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. Dark hair, nervous eyes, struggling with a massive tray of champagne flutes. The tray was too heavy for him. I could see it in the way his arms shook, the way his shoulders hunched with the effort. He was going to drop it. I knew it with the certainty of someone who'd spent years carrying heavy trays at Ruby's diner. I didn't think, just moved. Pure instinct. The same instinct that had made me catch Jordan when he'd stumbled as a toddler, that had made me grab the steering wheel when a drunk driver swerved into our lane, that had made me a mother. "Let me help you, son," I said quietly, reaching for the edge of the tray. "That's too heavy." Relief flooded his young face. "Thank you, ma'am. I don't know why they loaded it so full." Together we steadied the tray. For a moment it worked. I had one side, he had the other, the weight distributed between us. But as I started to step back, my low heel, the sensible shoes I'd bought specifically because they were safe, because they were practical, caught on the edge of an ornate rug. Just the edge. Just a tiny snag. I stumbled. Just a little. Just enough. The tray tipped. Time slowed down in that horrible way it does when disaster is unfolding and you can't stop it. I watched the champagne flutes slide. Watched them tumble through the air in a glittering cascade. Watched them arc toward Angela. She was standing near the bar, posing for photos with her bridesmaids, her face tilted toward the photographer in perfect 3/4 profile. The dress, the custom Vera Wang, the one she'd cried over, caught the champagne like a magnet. The sound was catastrophic. Glass shattering. Liquid splashing. Angela's scream. The entire reception went silent. 347 people stopped mid-conversation, mid-laugh, mid-sip. The string quartet's melody fractured mid-note. Even the air seemed to freeze. I stood there, still half-tangled in the rug, one hand outstretched where I'd tried to catch the tray. The young server had gone white as paper, and Angela looked down at her dress. The pristine ivory silk was soaked. Champagne dripped from the delicate lace pooled around her feet, stained the cathedral train. For 2 full seconds she just stared. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then she looked up, found me, and her face transformed from shock into something I'd never seen before, pure undiluted fury. "What have you done?" Her voice cracked through the silence like a whip. "You stupid, clumsy—" She stopped herself. I saw the calculation flash across her face. She was in public, at her wedding, with 300 witnesses. But the rage didn't disappear. It just focused, sharpened into something colder and more deliberate. She took 3 steps toward me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stand there as she approached her ruined dress, trailing champagne, her face a mask of barely controlled hysteria. And then her hand moved. The slap echoed through the marble hall like a gunshot. I'd been hit before in my life. Once by a drunk at the diner who didn't like being cut off. Once by a falling branch during a storm. Once accidentally by Jordan when he was 3 and flailing during a tantrum. But I'd never been hit with intent. With purpose. with the specific goal of causing humiliation. The sound was worse than the pain, that sharp crack of flesh on flesh ringing out in perfect silence. I felt my head snap to the side, felt the heat bloom across my cheek in a 5-pointed star, felt something warm and wet blood, no just tears filling my eyes. I couldn't blink, couldn't move, could only stand there with my face burning and my vision blurring while Angela's voice cut through the shocked silence. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" She wasn't looking at me anymore. She'd turned to face the crowd, turned to face Jordan, who stood frozen on the small stage where he'd been giving toasts. "This dress is custom Vera Wang. It cost $70,000. $70,000. And this. She gestured at me wildly, and I saw her struggling to find words that wouldn't expose what she really thought. Saw her trying to craft a narrative that would make her the victim. Jordan. She caught herself, but I heard it. Everyone heard it. She'd called him by the wrong name. "Security. Someone get her out of here. She's clearly had too much to drink. Stop." The word was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it cut through Angela's hysteria like a blade through silk. Jordan's voice. I looked up, my face still burning, my vision still blurred, and saw my son walking across the reception hall. Not quickly, not running, just walking with that purposeful stride he'd inherited from his father, the one that said he'd made a decision and nothing would change his mind. The crowd parted for him. 300 people creating a pathway while the string quartet held their instruments frozen mid-bow, while servers stood statue still with trays balanced, while photographers captured every second. Jordan reached me, looked at my face, at the red handprint blooming on my cheek, at the tears I couldn't stop, at the broken glass and champagne pooling around my sensible shoes. Then he took off his tuxedo jacket, the expensive custom-made jacket that probably cost more than my first car, and draped it gently over my shoulders. "Mom," he said softly. "Just that. Just Mom." Then he turned to face Angela. "What did you just do?" Jordan's voice was so quiet that people in the back leaned forward to hear, but everyone in the front rows heard it perfectly, heard the ice in it, the danger. Angela's face, which had been flushed with rage, started to pale. "Jordan, she ruined my dress." What did you just do?" "I was upset she destroyed. You hit my mother." He said it flatly, factually, like he was commenting on the weather or stating a mathematical proof. "At our wedding, in front of 300 witnesses. You struck my mother." Angela's mouth opened and closed. I could see her brain working, trying to find the angle, the explanation that would make this okay. "I didn't know she was. I thought she was. You thought she was what, Angela?" Jordan took a step closer to her. "Service staff. Someone it was acceptable to hit. Someone whose face you could slap without consequences." "No, I was in shock. I wasn't thinking. You called me Liam." His voice was still quiet, still deadly calm. "At our wedding, you called me by your ex-boyfriend's name. Then you hit my mother, the woman who worked 3 jobs to raise me, who sold her wedding ring, her dead husband's ring, so I could start my company. And you hit her." The crowd wasn't even pretending not to listen anymore. Every eye was on them. Every phone, I could see them now, dozens of phones held up recording every second. Angela seemed to realize it too. "Jordan, please, can we talk about this privately?" "No." He turned away from her, turned to face the crowd. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong and carried to every corner of that massive hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming today." Angela's hand flew to her mouth. "Jordan, don't this woman." He gestured to me, and I wanted to disappear, wanted to sink through the marble floor and never resurface. "This is Brenda Lawrence, my mother." The murmurs started. Confused whispers, shocked gasps. "The woman who just struck her is my wife, or was supposed to be my wife." He paused. "Angela, 3 months ago, you asked me to keep my mother's identity quiet at our wedding. You said it was to protect her from media attention, to give her privacy." "It was? I believed you." His voice cracked slightly. "I believed you when you said you wanted to protect her. I believed you when you said it was about privacy, not shame. I trusted you." "Jordan, I do care about her. You just what?" Now his voice rose, not a shout but louder, angrier. "You just wanted to hide the fact that my mother was a waitress, a cleaning lady, that I came from poverty, that my origins don't fit the story you want to tell about your life." Angela was crying now. Real tears, not the performative kind. That's not fair. What's not fair? Jordan said, his voice dropping back to that dangerous quiet. Is that my mother has been invisible for 5 months. You've systematically erased her from our lives, from our relationship. And today, at what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, you hit her. He walked back to me, took my arm gently. Come on, Mom. We're leaving. Jordan, I whispered. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He looked at me and I saw tears in his eyes. I should have done this months ago. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I let her make you feel small. Then he turned back to the microphone on the stage, and in a voice that was absolutely steady, absolutely final, he said, the reception is over. He paused, looked directly at Angela, who stood frozen in her champagne-soaked dress. And so is my marriage. What happened next was chaos. Angela lunged forward. Jordan, please, we can fix this. We can. But Patricia was already there, grabbing her daughter's arm, pulling her back. For once, the older woman's composure had cracked. She looked between Angela and Jordan with something like horror. Mr. Lawrence, she started, perhaps if we all just take a moment to. There's nothing to discuss, Mrs. Whitmore. Jordan's arm was still around my shoulders, supporting me, protecting me. I suggest you take care of your daughter. I'm taking care of my mother. Guests were standing now, some moving toward the exits, others pulling out phones, texting frantically. I could hear fragments of conversation. Did he just annul his marriage? At the reception. Did you see her hit? Get this, I'm uploading to. Jordan guided me through the crowd. People parted like water. Some stared. Some looked away embarrassed. One older woman I didn't know, her reached out and touched my arm gently as we passed. Good for him, she whispered. Good for you both. We made it to the museum entrance. Jordan's driver was already there. He must have texted ahead. The car door opened and Jordan helped me inside, sliding in beside me. As we pulled away, I looked back through the rear window. The Metropolitan Museum lit up like a palace. Inside, the wreckage of a wedding. Outside, guests streaming out phones glowing in the darkness. And standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the light, Angela. Her ruined dress, her ruined wedding, her ruined life. I should have felt triumphant, should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Jordan took me to his penthouse, helped me inside like I was made of glass, sat me down on his couch, the expensive one I'd always been afraid to sit on, and disappeared into the kitchen. He came back with tea. The kind I liked that he'd bought specially and kept stocked even though he never drank it. Earl Grey with honey. Drink this, Mom. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the cup. He wrapped my fingers around it, steadied them with his own. We sat in silence for a long time. The city glittered outside floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere out there, 300 wedding guests were spreading the story, posting videos, making calls, turning the worst moment of my life into entertainment. I'm sorry, I finally said. Jordan looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. What, Mom? I ruined your wedding, your marriage, everything, you Mom. He set down his tea, took my hands. You didn't ruin anything. You were trying to help someone. That's what you do. You see someone struggling, and you help. His voice cracked. Angela ruined her own marriage the moment she raised her hand to you. But the prenup, she'll get nothing now. First-year dissolution due to her fault. He stared at me. You knew about the prenup. I saw it. In your office. Months ago. I looked down at our joined hands. I should have said something then. Should have warned you that she what married me for money. He laughed bitterly. I knew, Mom. Part of me always knew. I wanted to believe that someone like her could love someone like me. Someone like you. Someone from nowhere. Someone whose mother cleaned houses. He pulled away, walked to the windows. I thought if I got rich enough, successful enough, if I erased the evidence of where I came from, I could belong in that world. Jordan. But I can't erase you, Mom, and I don't want to. He turned and his face was wet with tears. You are the evidence of where I came from. You are every good thing I've ever done, ever been, ever will be. And if Angela couldn't see that, couldn't respect that, then she never deserved to be my wife. I stood, went to him, and held my son while he cried. This brilliant man who'd built an empire reduced to a boy who just wanted his mother. I saw you, he whispered against my shoulder. At Principal Brennan's office, when you begged for an extension on my course fees. I was bringing you your coat, and I heard everything. I heard him treat you like you were nothing. I heard your voice shake, and I swore that day that I'd make it so you never had to beg again. Baby, you did. You gave me everything. Except respect. He pulled back, looked at me. I gave you money, Mom. An apartment. Security. But I didn't stand up for you when Angela started cutting you out of my life. I didn't fight for you when she asked me to hide you at our wedding. I gave you everything except the one thing you actually needed, my voice. You gave me your voice tonight. 3 months too late. We stood there together as the city hummed below us, and I thought about Robert, about how he'd promised to build me a life where I'd never have to worry, about how he'd died trying, about how our son had succeeded where his father couldn't. But success, I was learning, came in forms you couldn't predict. By morning, we were everywhere. I woke up on Jordan's guest room bed. He'd insisted I stay, hadn't wanted me to be alone to the sound of his voice in the living room. He sounded tense, angry. I found him on his laptop phone pressed to his ear. I don't care if it's trending. Take them down. DMCA. The videos sue if you have to, just... He saw me, and his expression softened. I'll call you back. What's trending? I asked, though part of me already knew. He hesitated, then turned the laptop toward me. #WeddingSlap was the #1 trend on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, every social media platform I barely understood. The videos were everywhere. Dozens of them from dozens of angles. The slap, Angela's scream, Jordan's quiet devastation, his announcement. All of it set to music cut into clips dissected in comment sections. Billionaire ends marriage at wedding after bride slaps his mother. This is what happens when you marry for money. The most expensive slap in history. TMZ had a whole segment. My face shocked hurt with that red handprint blooming frozen in a screenshot. They'd found photos of me from West Virginia, pictures I didn't even know existed. Me at Ruby's diner, me at Jordan's high school graduation, me crying at Robert's funeral. The billionaire's secret mother, Brenda Lawrence's story of sacrifice. They'd found Ruby, interviewed her. She'd told them everything, the 3 jobs, the selling of my wedding ring, the years of struggle. She's the strongest woman I ever knew, Ruby said in a shaky video from her retirement home. She built that boy out of nothing but grit and love. And to see someone treat her like that, Ruby's voice broke. It ain't right. The comments sections were brutal. Not to me, to Angela. Imagine being so embarrassed by someone's sacrifice that you'd hit them. She sold her wedding ring to fund his startup, and this is how the daughter-in-law treats her. I hope she loses everything. Mom, Jordan closed the laptop gently. I'm trying to get them taken down. Why? He looked surprised. Because you didn't ask for this attention, this invasion of your privacy. I thought about that, about my face on screens across the world, about strangers crying over my story, angry on my behalf, seeing me in a way I'd never been seen before. Visible. Leave them, I said quietly. What, leave the videos? Let people see. I looked at my son. For months I've been invisible. Angela wanted me erased, hidden, made into nothing. I felt something hardening in my chest. Not anger. Something clearer, stronger. But I'm not nothing, Jordan. And maybe people need to see that. He studied my face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Okay, Mom, okay. We didn't have to wait long to see the consequences. By that afternoon, Angela's Instagram, where she'd built a following as a lifestyle influencer, posting photos of expensive dinners and designer clothes, was flooded with comments. How does it feel to be the most hated woman on the internet? You don't deserve him. That woman gave up everything for her son and you hit her. By evening, brands started pulling out. The luxury handbag company that had sponsored her posts, the cosmetics line she'd been collaborating with, the charity board she sat on, they released a statement asking for her resignation effective immediately. By the next morning, Patricia Whitmore released a statement through the family's publicist. The Whitmore family deeply regrets the events of June 15th. Angela is devastated by her actions and will be seeking counseling. We ask for privacy during this difficult time. It was corporate, bloodless, the kind of statement you release when you're doing damage control, not when you actually feel remorse. Jordan showed me the statement over breakfast. Her mother's already cutting her loose. protecting the family name. How do you know? Because I know how old money works, Mom. When you become a liability, you get jettisoned. Angela's about to learn that the society she married me to join doesn't forgive public embarrassment. He was right. Over the following days, I watched Angela's world disintegrate through news articles and social media posts. Her friends, the ones who'd been in her wedding party who'd posed for photos, were suddenly unavailable for comment. The charity events she'd attended stopped inviting her. Even the boutique where she'd bought her wedding dress released a statement saying they don't endorse violence in any form. She was being erased, the same way she'd tried to erase me. I should have felt satisfaction, should have felt like justice was served. Instead, I felt a strange, aching pity, because I'd been erased before. I knew what it felt like to be made invisible, and no one deserved that, not even Angela. 3 weeks after the wedding, Jordan and I left New York. He owned a house upstate, something I'd never known about, tucked away in the Catskills. It was nothing like his penthouse. Just a simple farmhouse with wide porches and windows that looked out over mountains that reminded me achingly of home. I bought it 2 years ago, he told me as we pulled up the gravel drive. Thought I'd use it for weekends for quiet, but I never came. Angela hated it, said it was too rustic. We stayed there for a month. No internet, no social media, just us and the mountains and the slow work of healing. Jordan cooked breakfast every morning badly but with determination. We'd sit on the porch with coffee and watch the sun come up over the ridgeline, and slowly, gradually, I watched my son come back to himself. The version of Jordan that existed before Angela, before the pressure to be someone he wasn't. I forgot what this felt like, he said one morning, his hands wrapped around a mug. Just being. You've been running for a long time, baby. Since Dad died. He looked at me. I thought if I ran fast enough, made enough money, became successful enough, the grief would stay behind. But it followed me anyway. Grief doesn't get outrun, Jordan. It gets carried. And eventually, if you're lucky, it gets set down. We talked about Robert. Really talked for the first time in years. About the father Jordan barely remembered but had shaped his entire life around. About the promise he'd made at 12 years old to take care of me. About how that promise had become a weight he'd carried for 20 years. You don't have to take care of me anymore, I told him. You did it. You got us out. You gave me security. Now you get to just be my son. He cried then. My brilliant, successful billionaire son cried like a child in my arms. I'm sorry I let her make you invisible, Mom. You didn't let her do anything. She made her own choices. And so did you. In the end, you chose right. When we finally came back to the city, everything had changed, and nothing had changed. The internet had moved on to the next scandal. #WeddingSlap was no longer trending. But the damage and the awareness remained. I couldn't walk down the street in Brooklyn without people recognizing me. The billionaire's mother. The woman who'd been slapped at her son's wedding. Some people stared. Some looked away, embarrassed. But some more than I expected stopped me to say thank you. Thank you, I asked the first time it happened. A middle-aged woman outside the grocery store, tears in her eyes. For showing us it's okay to stand up, to take up space. I let my daughter treat me like I was invisible for years. After I saw your story, I called her. Set boundaries. She didn't like it, but the woman smiled. I'm done being erased. It happened again and again. Women, mostly older women, but not always, who saw something of themselves in my story. Who'd been made small by people who should have made them big. Who'd been ashamed of sacrifices they should have been proud of. I started to understand what Jordan had meant when he said people needed to see. But I still needed purpose. Money couldn't fix that. Recognition couldn't fix that. I needed my hands to be busy. I found St. Mary's on a Tuesday in August, walking through Brooklyn with no destination in mind. It was a small, humble building attached to a Catholic church with a hand-painted sign, "All welcome, no questions asked." Inside, volunteers were serving lunch to a line of people who looked like they'd been forgotten by the world. Homeless men with weathered faces. Women with children clinging to their legs. Elderly folks who reminded me of the coal miners back home, used up and thrown away. A priest was ladling soup. He was maybe 70, with kind eyes and hands that shook slightly from age or Parkinson's or both. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Can I help you?" I replied. He blinked, then smiled. "You volunteering, if you'll have me." "What's your name?" Brenda. He didn't recognize me, didn't make the connection to the viral videos or the news stories. Just handed me an apron and pointed me toward the vegetables that needed chopping. I started going every Tuesday and Thursday. Just Brenda. No last name, no story. Just a woman who showed up on time, worked hard, and wasn't afraid of the big soup pots that needed scrubbing. Father Patrick. I learned his name eventually had been a coal miner before he became a priest. Lost 3 fingers in an accident, found God in the hospital, and never looked back. "You're from Appalachia," he said one day, statement not question. "West Virginia. How'd you know? The way you work, like you're making up for lost time." He smiled gently. "Also, you called the mop bucket a slop bucket. Dead giveaway." We became friends. He told me about the mine, about finding purpose after loss. I told him about Robert, about Jordan, about learning to exist without purpose being the same as work. "You're doing the hardest thing," he said. "Learning that your value isn't in what you produce. It's in who you are." I'm not there yet. None of us are Brenda. We're all just walking each other home. The letter arrived at St. Mary's in late September, 3 months after the wedding. Father Patrick brought it to me while I was washing dishes, his face uncertain. "This came for you. Woman dropped it off, said it was important. Wouldn't give her name. The envelope was expensive. Cream-colored heavy stock. My name written in careful script." I dried my hands, opened it with trembling fingers. "Dear Mrs. Lawrence, you don't know me anymore. The woman who struck you at what was supposed to be my wedding was a stranger even to myself. I'm writing not to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But to tell you the truth, I should have told Jordan months ago. When I was 16, my father's investment firm collapsed. SEC investigation. Criminal charges that were eventually dropped, but the damage was done. We lost everything overnight. The house in Greenwich, the club memberships, the friends who'd been fixtures at our dinner table suddenly didn't return my mother's calls. I watched my mother cry herself to sleep for months. I watched my father age 10 years in one. I watched the women who used to call her darling cross the street to avoid us at the country club we could no longer afford to belong to. I swore I would never be poor again. Never be looked down upon again. Never feel that shame. When I met Jordan at that tech conference, I saw safety. I saw a man who was brilliant and kind and successful enough to buy back everything my family had lost. I saw a door back into the world that had rejected us. When I learned about you, about your 3 jobs, about cleaning houses, about the poverty Jordan came from, I panicked. I thought if people knew, if society knew, they'd see me as that girl who married up again. They'd see Jordan as new money instead of the genius he is. They'd look down on both of us. So I tried to hide you. I convinced Jordan it was about protecting you from media attention. I convinced myself it was about privacy. But the truth is uglier. I was ashamed. Ashamed of your sacrifices. Ashamed that they reminded me of my own family's fall. Ashamed that loving Jordan meant accepting that he came from the world I was so terrified of returning to. The slap wasn't about the dress. It was never about the dress. It was about panic. About 300 witnesses seeing my carefully constructed image destroyed in front of them. About losing control of the narrative I'd spent 18 months building. I'm not telling you this to excuse what I did. There is no excuse. I struck you. I humiliated you. I tried to erase you. And in doing so, I destroyed the only real thing I've ever had. I've lost everything now. The endorsement deals, the friends, the charity boards. My mother barely speaks to me. The society I fought so hard to rejoin has rejected me more completely than they did the first time. But the worst part isn't what I've lost. It's what I threw away. Jordan was the first person who ever loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. He saw through the performance. He made me laugh. He made me feel safe in a way that had nothing to do with money. And I repaid that love by hitting his mother. I don't ask you to forgive me. I don't even ask you to acknowledge this letter. I'm writing because you deserve to know the truth. And because Jordan deserves to know that none of this was his fault. He blames himself. I know he does. He thinks he should have protected you sooner, should have seen what I was doing, should have stood up earlier. But Mrs. Lawrence, Brenda, the truth is that he loved me, really loved me. And love makes you blind to the worst in people because you're too busy seeing the best. Tell him he's a good man. Tell him his mother raised someone with honor and courage and the strength to choose right over easy. Tell him that choosing you in that moment when everything was at stake was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. That's your legacy. Not the sacrifices, though those matter. Not the 3 jobs or the sold wedding ring, though those shaped him. Your legacy is that you raised a man who, when forced to choose, chose love over image, chose his mother over his marriage, chose truth over comfort. I only wish I'd been worthy of him, with deepest shame, deepest regret, and a respect I should have shown from the beginning. Angela, I read the letter 3 times, sitting on the steps behind St. Mary's while the Brooklyn afternoon faded into evening, while people came and went through the soup kitchen doors, while the world moved on around me. Father Patrick found me there as the sun was setting. "Bad news?" he asked gently. "No, just complicated news." He sat beside me, didn't push. We watched the light fade together. "She was scared," I finally said. "The woman who hit me, she was just scared." "Most cruelty comes from fear," Father Patrick said. "Doesn't make it right, but understanding it. That's the first step toward letting it go. I don't know if I can forgive her. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, Brenda. It's a choice. You make it every day, every hour if you have to. Some days you'll mean it, some days you won't, but you keep choosing it anyway." I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my apron pocket. "What will you do?" he asked. "I don't know yet." She came on a Thursday in October. I was at my usual station serving stew to the lunch crowd. I just ladled a portion into a bowl for a regular Mr. Chen, a former accountant who'd lost everything in the 2008 crash, when I felt someone standing at the front of the line. Not in the line, just standing there, waiting. I looked up. Angela stood 3 feet away, wearing jeans and a simple sweater I'd never seen before. No makeup, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked thin, exhausted, completely unlike the polished woman who'd walked down the aisle 3 months ago. The ladle slipped from my hand, clattering against the pot. "Mrs. Lawrence," she said quietly. "Brenda, I got the address from Father Patrick. I needed to see you." The kitchen had gone quiet. Other volunteers had stopped working. The people in line were staring. "Angela," my voice came out steadier than I expected. "You're not in line. I'm not here for food. I'm here to—" Her voice cracked. "I needed to see you, to apologize, face to face, not just in a letter." Father Patrick appeared at my elbow. "Brenda, you want me to—" "It's okay, Father." I set down the ladle, untied my apron. "Angela, let's talk outside." We walked to the small garden behind the church. A few benches, some tired-looking roses, a statue of Mary with her arms outstretched. Angela sat on one bench. I sat on another, facing her. "I got your letter," I said. "Did you read it? Every word, 3 times." She nodded, looking down at her hands. They were shaking. "I meant every word. I know that doesn't change what I did. No, it doesn't make it okay. But I needed you to know the truth." "Why?" I asked. "Why tell me now? Why come here?" "Because I lost everything. My career, my family's respect, my place in society. But the worst part is that I lost the ability to look at myself in the mirror." She looked up and her eyes were red from crying. "I see that moment every time I close my eyes. Your face, Jordan's face. The way I threw away the only real love I've ever known because I was too scared to be seen as anything less than perfect." I studied her. This broken woman who'd tried to break me, who'd slapped me in front of 300 people, who tried to erase me from my own son's life. And I saw myself at 26 standing in Principal Brennan's office, voice shaking, begging for payment extensions. I saw myself at 38 scrubbing toilets in houses that cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. I saw every moment I'd been made to feel small, worthless, less than. I saw what fear looked like when it controlled you. "Angela," I said quietly, "why did you really come here? Because I need you to know I'm sorry. Because Jordan won't see me, won't return my calls. Because—" She stopped, started again. "Because you're the only person who might understand what it's like to be desperate." "I understand desperation," I said. "But there's a difference between us, Angela." "What's that?" "I was desperate for my son's future. You were desperate for your own image." I leaned forward. "I know what it's like to be scared of losing everything. I lived that fear for 20 years, but I never made other people small to make myself feel big." She flinched like I'd hit her. "You're right. You're absolutely right." "But I continued, I also know what it's like to make mistakes, to let fear drive choices you regret, to wish you could go back and do everything differently. Hope flickered in her eyes. Then you forgive me. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about forgiveness, about what Father Patrick had said, about choosing it every day. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Some days I think I can. Some days I see that red handprint in the mirror and I'm back in that museum feeling small and ashamed and invisible. Forgiveness isn't a switch, Angela. It's a process. I understand. But I stood up. I can do something else for you right now. I walked back into the soup kitchen, filled a bowl with hot stew, added fresh bread, brought it back out to the garden and placed it in Angela's trembling hands. Everyone makes mistakes, I said. Some bigger than others. Forgiveness is hard. But kindness I can do right now. You look like you haven't eaten in days. She stared down at the bowl like it was made of gold. Tears splashed into the stew. Why? She whispered. After everything I did, why would you? Because someone once gave my son a laptop when we had nothing. Because Ruby gave me extra hours when she knew I was drowning. Because Father Patrick let me volunteer here without asking questions. I sat back down. Kindness isn't earned, Angela. It's given. Now eat. She ate. Slowly at first, then faster like she was starving. Maybe she was. Not for food, though I suspected she hadn't been eating well, but for grace. For someone to see her at her lowest and offer her something other than judgment. When the bowl was empty, she looked up. What do I do now? How do I come back from this? You don't come back, Angela. You go forward. You become someone new, someone better. I paused. You have a degree in journalism, right? She nodded, confused. Jordan's foundation, the one that funds education programs in Appalachia, they need someone to run communications, to tell the stories of the kids they're helping. The pay is $40,000 a year, enough to start over, not enough to be comfortable. Her eyes widened. You want me to work for Jordan's foundation? I want you to work for yourself, to build something real, to learn that your value isn't in who you know or what you wear. It's in what you do for people who can't do for themselves. But why would you help me? Because I remember what it's like to need help and be too proud to ask. Because my son loved you once and that means something. Because I stopped. Thought about the woman who'd tried to erase me and the broken woman sitting in front of me now. Because everyone I told Jordan about the encounter that night over dinner at his penthouse. You did what? He set down his fork, staring at me. I recommended her for the communications position at your foundation. Mom, she hit you. At my wedding. In front of everyone. And you want to give her a job? I want to give her a chance. There's a difference. He stood paced to the windows. I watched him struggle with it, anger and hurt warring with the values I'd raised him with. I don't understand, he finally said. How can you forgive her when I can't? I didn't say I forgave her. I said I gave her a chance. I joined him at the window. Son, I've been thinking a lot about anger, about what happens when we hold on to it. It doesn't hurt the person who wronged us. It hurts us. She deserves to hurt. Maybe. But do you deserve to carry that anger for the rest of your life? I took his hand. Angela was wrong. What she did was cruel and indefensible. But she's also a scared woman who lost everything, including the man she loved, because she couldn't get past her own fear. That doesn't excuse— No, it doesn't. But Jordan, you and I, we know what it's like to be scared. We know what desperation looks like. And we know that people are more than the worst thing they've ever done. He was quiet for a long time. You're stronger than me, Mom. No, baby. I've just had more practice. Life's kicked me down more times. I've learned that staying down hurts worse than getting back up. I squeezed his hand. You don't have to forgive her. You don't even have to see her. But don't let what she did make you someone you're not. Don't let her take your kindness. The community center opened on a Tuesday in June, exactly 1 year after the wedding that broke the internet. Jordan had bought Ruby's diner, the building, and the lot it sat on, and transformed it into something Ruby herself had cried over when he showed her the plans. Brenda's Place Community Center, read the sign out front. Below it, in smaller letters, in memory of Robert Lawrence and in honor of every parent who built castles with broken hands. Inside was everything we'd dreamed of, a library with thousands of books. Computer labs where kids could learn coding, a community kitchen, meeting rooms, after-school programs, all of it free, all of it available to anyone in Appalachia who needed it. Ruby, now 78 and using a walker, stood beside me as we prepared to cut the ribbon. "Your boy done good, Brenda. He learned from the best," I said, squeezing her hand. Jordan stood on my other side, looking nervous in a way he never did at board meetings or tech conferences. "You think Dad would like it?" he asked quietly. I thought about Robert, about his calloused hands and coal dust laugh, about how he'd promised to give us a life where we'd never have to worry. He'd be so proud, baby, of this place, of you, of the man you became. The crowd gathered former miners and their families, current residents of West Virginia towns that looked too much like the one I'd left kids with bright eyes and bigger dreams. I saw faces that looked like mine, used to tired, hopeful, determined. And in the back, standing quietly, I saw Angela. She wore simple clothes and carried a notepad. She'd been working for Jordan's foundation for 6 months now, telling the stories of kids who got scholarships, who learned to code, who made it out. Her articles were good, honest, real in a way her old lifestyle posts had never been. We hadn't become friends, probably never would, but she'd shown up for work every day, done the job without complaint, started to understand that value came from what you gave, not what you took. Jordan saw her too. His jaw tightened, but he didn't ask her to leave. "Ready, Mom?" he asked. I picked up the scissors, looked at the ribbon, looked at this building that had once been the diner where I'd worked until my feet bled. "Ready?" We cut the ribbon together. The crowd applauded. Children rushed inside, their excited voices filling the space where tired men used to nurse their coffee and count their change. After the ceremony, after the speeches and the tours and the congratulations, I found myself alone in what used to be Ruby's kitchen. Now it was a teaching space where volunteers would show kids how to cook nutritious meals on a budget. A little girl wandered in, maybe 8 years old, with messy braids and curious eyes. "Are you Miss Brenda?" she asked. "I am. My mama says you used to work here, when it was a diner." "I did, for a long time. And now your son made it into this," she gestured around, eyes wide. "He did. That's cool." She paused. "My mama works 2 jobs. She's real tired all the time. Do you think I could do something cool like this someday, even though we don't got much money?" I knelt down to her level, looked into those bright, hopeful eyes that reminded me so much of Jordan at that age. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" "Lily." "Well, Lily, I'm going to tell you a secret." I took her small hands in my weathered ones. "The money doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with what you've got. Your mama's working hard for you because she loves you. And that love, that sacrifice, that's the real foundation. Everything else you can build on that. Like your son did. Like my son did. Like you will too if you work hard and stay kind and remember where you came from." She hugged me sudden and fierce, then ran off to explore the computer lab. Jordan appeared in the doorway. "Making promises again, Mom." "Just telling the truth." I stood my knees protesting after a year of less physical work, but my heart full. Some little girl's mama is working herself to the bone right now, just like I did, and that little girl is going to have opportunities because of this place. Because of what you built. "What we built," he corrected. "Mom, I've been thinking. This community center, it should have your name on it, not just the sign outside. The foundation itself. I want to rename it the Brenda Lawrence Foundation. Jordan, you gave me everything. Let me give you this. Let your name mean something to all the other mothers out there working 3 jobs. Let them see that their sacrifices matter, that they matter." I looked at my son, this man who'd taken every lesson I'd taught him and built an empire not just of money, but of meaning. Who'd learned that success wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touched. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." He pulled me into a hug and we stood there in the kitchen where my journey had started. So that night back in Brooklyn, I stood on the balcony of my apartment with the photograph of Robert. The old faded one from the coal mine. Our young faces smudged with dust arms around each other. My phone buzzed. A text from Angela. "Thank you for today. For letting me be there. For the chance you gave me. I'm trying to become someone worthy of it." I didn't respond right away. Just stood there looking at Robert's face in the photograph. "We did it, love," I whispered to the image. "Not the way you planned. Not the way I expected. But our boy, he's building castles, and he's building them for people like us. Jordan stepped onto the balcony, 2 cups of tea in his hands. He'd started this ritual evening tea together, no phones, just us. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I looked at the photo, at Robert's young, hopeful face, at my own determined expression, at the future we couldn't see but fought for anyway. "I'm thinking about hands," I said. "These hands that scrubbed floors and poured coffee and packed boxes on assembly lines. I used to think they were just worn out, used up, evidence of hard years." I held up my hands in the city light, weathered, age-spotted. The calluses still there, faded but permanent. But these hands built you, Jordan. They built your strength and your values and your understanding that success means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up. I smiled. They didn't build an empire of glass and steel. They built something that lasts. They built a soul. Jordan took my hands in his, raised them to his lips, kissed each one right then left with a reverence that made my eyes sting. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for every sacrifice, for every lesson, for choosing to be strong when it would have been easier to be bitter. Being bitter is easy, baby. Being strong, that's the work of a lifetime." We stood together as the city hummed below us as somewhere in West Virginia, a little girl named Lily was dreaming of a future that was now possible. As Angela sat in a small apartment trying to rebuild herself, as Ruby slept peacefully in her retirement home, as Robert's memory lived on in every life the foundation touched. I'd been invisible once, erased, made small by people who thought my value was measured in what I could provide rather than who I was. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I was Brenda Lawrence, mother, survivor, builder of futures. And my story, our story, was just beginning. "Come on," Jordan said, guiding me back inside. "Let's watch one of those old movies you love." We settled on the couch, the city glowing outside, and I thought about forgiveness and redemption and second chances, about how cruelty often came from fear, about how kindness was a choice you made every single day, and about how the greatest revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming so fully, completely yourself that no one could ever make you small again.